Happy Wednesday. Again, we'll do one of our Wednesday meditations during the time when we're away from our Bible studies and our teaching groups and fellowship groups. A couple of announcements. First, I'd like to invite families to chalk the wall in front of the church along North Main Street. There are already some great pictures and words and things of encouragement down there about this COVID-19, and no COVID in Ovid is one of the sayings, which is kind of fun. But if you want to get out on a sunny day, come and do that. Call the church, and I will tell you where the sidewalk chalk is stashed. But the church, remember, remains closed. The office phone does have a message machine, and we check that often. So please do leave messages on the office phone if you don't get directly through to the office. And worship also remains closed through the end of May, unless, of course, things change, which is kind of doubtful. So watch worship online and pass along the online information to friends. Get others to watch, and also don't be afraid to print the sermon, as we do print those after each one of the times when I'm speaking. And remember, if you have digital connectivity and the savvy to use that equipment to get the information that the church is putting out and providing, and the worship services and these meditations, share that blessing of digital connections with people who may not have it. That's a great ministry opportunity. So share and share alike as you can with your digital equipment and savvy. This Wednesday meditation, these times have been sharing my favorite passages. And I go way back to gather this one. The first passage, I think, that really made me think hard about who Jesus was and who I was in relationship to Jesus. And that passage is Luke 2:52. Now, first, some background. The first two chapters of Luke, of course, contain the birth and early childhood narratives and records about Jesus. Chapter 1 has all of the announcements and the pre-birth stories, closing, of course, with the birth of John the Baptist himself. But chapter 2 opens with Jesus' birth and has the visits to the temple in which Jesus' parents dedicate Jesus to God as the Jewish law required. And then there are two passages that fill in for all of Jesus' growing up years. That first passage about Jesus' childhood is Luke 2:39 and 40. Let me read it. So when they, meaning Mary and Joseph, had performed all the things according to the law of the Lord, they returned to Galilee, to their own city, Nazareth. And the child Jesus grew and became strong in spirit, filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. And then the second passage, looking to Jesus' young years, is at the conclusion of that infamous family trip to Jerusalem for the Passover, in which Jesus got lost. And as a young man, he was, I guess, free to wander around, but they started home. And Joseph and Mary finally found out that Jesus was not among the group of people going back, and went back to Jerusalem looking for him. And that was where the conclusion of chapter 2 concludes that story. Jesus is 12 years old, and at Luke 2:51, we read, "Then he returned to Nazareth with Joseph and Mary, and was obedient to them. And his mother stored all these things in her heart. And Jesus grew in wisdom and in stature and favor with God and all the people." Now, what did Mary store in her heart? Well, she stored in her heart the fact that Jesus was amazing even the teachers of the law at the temple. He was teaching the teachers. So these passages are all we know about looking back into the early life of Jesus as a boy. Now think of this with me for a moment. Jesus is Emmanuel, God with us, meaning of the word Emmanuel, the name. And from the time Jesus was born to the time he was 12, these are the only passages we have about him. That is until Jesus was around 30 years old, the age we believe that he started his ministry at, as John baptized him to start him toward what we know as the gospel stories. But all we really know is that, and let me do this, God as a boy, God as a teenager, God as a young man, all we really know about God being with us in human form as he grew up is that he grew in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and all the people. Luke 2:52. And that's the New Living Translation. So imagine Luke. Now, we understand Luke was a doctor and very well educated for his time. Luke set out to write an orderly account of Jesus' life, and that probably included interviews with Mary and Jesus' brothers and sisters, his family, and summarizing those words that they gave him. What they remembered about Jesus was Jesus growing in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and with all the people. Now, wisdom. Wisdom is not just knowledge. Wisdom is much more than that. Knowledge is knowing the facts. But you can know the facts and not do anything with them. And so you have understanding that comes after knowledge. Understanding is knowing how the facts relate to each other. But wisdom is putting what you know and understand to work wisely and well. That's wisdom. So this is not just knowledge and understanding that Jesus is growing in. It's wisdom. And of course, as God with us, it's holy wisdom that he's growing in. Now, people remember Jesus growing and increasing in wisdom. In one story Mary might have related was a story about the wisdom that Jesus had at 12 in the temple, teaching the teachers. And Mary might have related these words and actually said, "We finally discovered Jesus in the temple sitting among the religious leaders, listening to them and asking them questions. All who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers to their questions." Jesus was 12, teaching the teachers. Wisdom, holy wisdom, was part of who Jesus was from early in his life. Now, to grow in stature, the second part of Luke 2:52, is to grow up physically. Of course, that's true. From 12 to 30 years old, Jesus would have grown up physically. But as God with us, Jesus would have also taken care of the blessing of his physical body. Jesus would have known and wisely applied a deep understanding of what was healthy and what was harmful. Is our growing, if we have grown, is the way we care for our physical selves, knowing, understanding, and wise? Doesn't take to just 30, but to 130 if we wish. And we need to be taking care of ourselves. And finally, Jesus grew in favor with God and with all the people. Now here we would understand those who reported on Jesus' young life, Mary and his family, would tell Luke about Jesus observing for God all of the traditions and the demands of worship, and obviously living a life full of faith. Jesus, as God with us, would know how to honor God the Father in his everyday life, in his words, with his actions, and with his attitudes as well. Everything about Jesus honored God. And finally, growing in favor with all the people. Jesus' wisdom would have been graciously and easily shared without making anyone feel self-conscious, awkward, or not as smart as Jesus. Jesus' care of himself as he grew would have been an example to others. And Jesus' worship and honoring of God would have been so exemplary, people could not help but like Jesus and admire his faith. Jesus could not help but to grow in favor with all the people. And all, the word all in that sentence is very important. It is an all-inclusive word. All the people grew in favor with Jesus. I ran into this passage early in Sunday school and as a youth in my youth group, in the church I grew up in. Also as a counselor in the Christian camp I worked in, Luke 2:52 was the stated goal of the camp, of what we were going to be teaching and showing young people and kids in camp. One of the points in our Bible study in camp every year, now thousands of kids have gone through that camp and learned Luke 2:52 because it's a memory verse they have to learn. It's required. Now, why would that be? Because it shows them how Jesus grew when Jesus was their age. And it shows us how we can continue to grow in wisdom and in stature in favor with God and all the people. This passage was, in short, all around me for many of my formative years. And as it was an insight into the life of Jesus when he was my age, I looked seriously at this passage. But when is growing or being wiser or taking good care of your physical gift of your body, when is growing in favor with God and all others ever just something to do until we're 30, or to stop doing, or to stop paying attention to? This is an everyday, all of our lives, every day of our lives passage. So I offer one of my favorite passages today, Luke 2:52. Jesus grew in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and all the people. As a passage we can live by, as a passage to challenge us. And now today, with COVID-19 bouncing around the world, how would this apply in a special way? Well, grow wise. By keeping track of what's going on and by knowing, understanding, and being wise about applying social distancing, staying home, using hand sanitizer and washing your hands frequently, wearing masks in public. The learning curve about the trials and tribulations coronavirus has brought to us is pretty steep. And it pays all of us a dividend of health to know and understand and be wise about applying the new things we've learned. Wisdom for today speaks right to growing into stature, taking care of ourselves physically with all of the things we're learning about. So there are new ways to take care of our physical bodies, the gifts God has given us physically. And so many of us have the time, the incentive, and a Bible. And we can grow in favor with God through reading the Word, prayer, worship, even if it is online, and remembering our own favorite passages and thinking about them again. And these days, growing in favor with all people would encourage us to think outside the box and imagine how we can still serve and help our families, our neighbors, our church family, our friends, and how to serve God by continuing to serve others. And serve others by praying. Pray through the prayer list that we send out by email, and if you don't get it by email, find someone who does and have them copy it for you. Pray through it by name and situation of each of the people in the prayer list. And if you have that prayer list electronically, print it for someone who doesn't. Make face masks. We have several members who have dusted off the sewing machines and gotten out all the old fabrics they have, found a pattern online and made some wonderful masks. We've handed out probably 50 of them right here at the church. Serve others by staying in contact and communicating with them. Phone, written letters, emails, texts, or by dropping cookies on somebody's front porch and then ringing the doorbell and running. Why not? Growing in favor with all the people is only limited by our own imaginations and willingness. So Luke 2:52. Jesus grew in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and all the people. Jesus, of course, did it perfectly. We can do it, working to do the very best of our ability each and every day we live. We can try hard to do this. And one of my life goals is probably to have someone ask my family when I'm dead and gone what I was like and have them be able to say, well, Rob spent his life growing in wisdom. He was a lifelong learner. He grew in stature, tried to take care of himself the best way he knew how, but he also grew in favor with God and with all the people. I'd like people to say that about me and be able to do it with a straight face. But I'd also like them to say that about all of you. Amen.